while he's listening to cases. That's the
not
sound.
Where I thought that was going to go.
I was going to ask you to guess, but you would never guess in a million years.
I thought you were going to say he was like farting or something.
No, I wish he was farting. So I don't know, like if they just like pulled it. Oh, they pulled his robe off, and aha! But that was the disclosure. Well, Brooke, we all love attorneys, at least most of us do. But they can sometimes be little bad boys and girls, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Our topic is attorneys behaving badly. So I'd like to throw a question out to the listeners today. And the question is simply this: is it ever ethical for an attorney to sleep with his or her client while they're representing? And if it is ethical, should they do it anyway? All right. So while people are furiously typing their answers, I will pose the same question to you, Brooke. Do you think an attorney can ethically sleep with his or her client?
I think common sense answer would be no. However, I think a lot of people lack common sense and have a lot of lust. So I don't know. You tell me. You're the attorney. Have you behaved badly?
Well, some of these attorneys can be pretty sexy in their presentation. But before I get into my answer, what if the client wants to do it? What if this is the client's idea? Does that change your answer?
No, I think that makes it more tempting, and maybe because you're both consenting adults. I just think it's like any other, like you wouldn't do that with your doctor, right? You wouldn't do that with your therapist. I think it's frowned upon for all of these other professions. So why wouldn't it be frowned upon for your attorney?
That's a great
Also, that just sounds like so messy.
Well, here's the reality of it. Luckily, we have somebody who's coming on the show today to talk about this exact question. And you'll be surprised to know that until recently, there wasn't a lot of rules about this. So when I was actively practicing, there was nothing wrong. And believe me, I had many times say no, but I always said no. And here's why I think, in my opinion, and someone might have a different opinion about why this really isn't a good idea. I think most people who come to you and where we see the predatory behavior is men who are representing women, and we see this a lot in family law cases. And family law cases are is the area of law that really got the attention of the bars to finally address this question. But the client is in a really, really difficult situation. It's a difficult emotional situation. A lot of women have lost confidence in themselves because they're getting divorced often after a long relationship, and they just don't know what to do. And so I just don't ever think that's a good idea. And I really don't think that a person can even properly consent in that situation. So we're going to go through all these scenarios in a little bit when we have attorney Cynthia Payne joining us in just a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it would definitely be a power imbalance, just like with a lot of other professions. It's just one person is vulnerable and one person holds all the power.
Yeah. And another thing that people may not be aware of is when we talk about power imbalances, and these aren't attorneys, but they're closely related to and operate in the system, and that is police officers. And so we see a lot of police officers behaving badly when they shouldn't be, when they should be the ones that are trusted. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're also going to talk about attorneys that actually rise up and become judges and have all the power and some of the crazy things that they do. These are all important questions, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, I'm excited to welcome attorney Cynthia Payne to the show today. Cynthia is the executive VP of U.S. Legal Groups, where she oversees about 40 attorneys in the divorce and family law world, criminal defense world, and estate planning. But Cynthia actually has been around for quite some time. Started out as a supervisor at the public defender's office, and then went into private practice as a criminal defense attorney, came to work for U.S. Legal Groups, and then worked her way all the way up to the top. You're a busy lady. So Cynthia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, when the topic came up, attorneys behaving badly, and it is what we're talking about. I could not think of a better person to have on the show. So here's the first question I want to start with. And I asked Brooke this, this is the question everybody wants to know, or at least I want to know. Is it ethical? Can an attorney, because we see it in the movies, we see it on the TV all the time, is it actually ethical for an attorney to sleep with hers or her client? I mean, where do we even start with this topic, Cynthia?
Well, I do think that's a question that people ask a lot. And for people of our generation, we grew up watching LA Law and shows like that, where I think some of the attorneys, that was their specialty, was in sleeping with their clients. But what's interesting about the legal history of it is that there wasn't actually a rule around it until the 2000s. So when we first started practicing in the 90s, there wasn't a specific rule regarding whether an attorney could sleep with their client. There were some rules around you can't have a proprietary interest in litigation. And I guess some people could have called that a proprietary interest, but it didn't specifically address sexual relations. Some states had created their own rules around this, but it wasn't until 2002 that the ABA finally came up with a model rule that specifically addressed this.
Why do you think it took so long do you have any idea why it took so long for the legal community to deal with this issue?
I don't know, other than I think that maybe there was just this myth surrounding attorneys, like, they're officers of the court, they'll do what they're supposed to do, they'll always choose to do the right thing, which of course you and I know that's not true. So I don't know if they just didn't feel like they had to actually create a rule until it became super apparent that they needed to do that.
And how did that come about, do you know?
Well, I think it was because there just had become so many cases that were coming before the states. And so because the state bars were starting to create their own rules, it's interesting. Sometimes the state bars end up sort of leading the way. And then the ABA kind of brings up the rear and goes, well, I guess we should make a rule around this. And then when the ABA finally made a rule around this, it didn't address all the situations. And let me tell you why I say that. So I'm going to read you the rule specifically because I think it's interesting. So this rule says a lawyer shall not have sexual relations with a client unless a consensual sexual relationship existed between them when the attorney-client relationship commenced. Okay? So that's pretty black and white.
I know how to get around that already.
Heck yeah, you can get around that. It doesn't talk about a prospective client. It doesn't talk about former clients. It doesn't talk about all of these little ways that people could try and get around it. But it hasn't been amended in 24 years.
Is this enforceable or is this just suggested as how do these rules work? Will you get your license taken away?
So a lot of times what happens is the ABA will promulgate these model rules and they are not enforceable. But what they do is they serve as exactly what it sounds like, a model for the states to follow. So after they created this in 2002, now all but 4 or 5 states have rules around this, which are actually in their rules of professional ethics for the lawyers licensed in their states. So now, yes, you can get sanctioned for it. You can get brought up on a disciplinary board charge if you violate it.
So back in the day when I was practicing, right, as a young, handsome attorney, are you telling me that you could just sleep with your client? You just have sex with your client during the middle of the case, murder case, divorce case, doesn't matter. That was the rule. Till when? When did this change?
2002. So I'm gonna date myself a little bit here because I have 2 examples of this. So the first example, actually I have 3 examples. The first example I'm going to give you was in the late 1990s, because that's when I first started practicing. And this is before there was a rule in New Mexico, which has since adopted the model rule, and before the ABA did their rule in 2002. So this is sort of when it was still the Wild West. When I was at the public defender's office, there was a public defender there, a woman actually, who had a habit of finding all her boyfriends from her clients. So she would go to the jail or the prison. And this is a little side note for how things used to work in the jails. When I would go visit a client in the jail, they wouldn't it wasn't like you see on TV. I didn't get to go into a little room and talk to my client privately. Basically, I would walk into a pod and my client would come out to talk to me and we would get surrounded by like 30 guys who all wanted to ask me questions at the same time as my client. So this woman decided to take that as an opportunity to scope out the talent, find somebody that maybe she wanted to go out with. And she ended up dating a few of her clients and a few other people that way. But then again, this was the late 90s, no rule against it. So no harm, no foul. None of them ever complained. So that's one example.
What's kind of the most extreme case you've seen of that on the like the criminal offense side?
The most extreme case I have seen with that actually occurred after the rules had changed. And that was an attorney who began a relationship with a client. Again, this was a woman. And I don't know if it's just, the hammer gets brought down harder on women. I would suggest yes. But this was a woman. Yes. Thank you, Brooke. I agree. We're going to talk about that later, I think. But this was a woman who began a relationship with a man that she was representing actually on a murder charge. And they started having an intimate relationship. This was discovered, I don't know if it was by the court or by the district attorney's office, but essentially, and I can't remember now, the details escape me, if it had pled to something or if it had gone to trial and there had been a resolution that way. But when this came to light, essentially the client then moved to withdraw either the plea or to vacate the conviction, I can't remember, based on ineffective assistance of counsel, and basically said, well, I was sleeping with my lawyer, and so that's a problem, right? And it was really embarrassing because then the client got new counsel, and the attorney ended up having to testify in court as to this relationship that she had had with the client, and the conviction did get vacated. And so he got a new trial out of the whole thing. But the disciplinary board at that point did discipline her, and she received a deferred 1-year suspension. So it was kind of a slap on the wrist, but it was still a mark on her record because of that.
Can you imagine sleeping with a murderer, like right after the murder? That's pretty wild. Brooke, is this just like you think this is just like the ultimate bad boy attraction? What's going on here?
I definitely
sometimes
think
there are reasons.
Both men and women have like bad boy, bad girl. That's just what they're into. Personally, I'm not. I would prefer to be stress-free, but some people like that.
Cynthia, so why would that be a conflict? I don't understand the conflict of interest, or why would that be ineffective assistance of counsel? If she got him a plea and everybody was happy, what's the thinking there?
I'm not sure why the court found it was a conflict of interest, but you can imagine the inherent conflict of interest, right? I mean, are you advocating zealously and effectively and impartially? If you have a vested interest in the outcome, are you perhaps not behaving on the up and up with clients? Maybe there's a question of candor to the tribunal if you are having to talk about client history or anything like that. I just have no idea. These were closed proceedings because it was a disciplinary board thing, so I don't know why they found that, but they definitely found it in New Mexico's equivalent of that rule. So yeah, it was because of the attorney-client relationship.
It would also be a really easy way to break up with your boyfriend, right? Just fucking plead him to get him out of your life.
Seems extreme.
That might be what they're thinking.
Kind of seems like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. So is it a problem though? What if the client wants it? Like, is there any, can you waive it? What if the client wants it?
But don't you think that is the question for the professional? I mean, you have a license for a reason.
It's improper.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Cynthia on that. That's where you have to ask yourself ethical boundaries. And I do think it's a little bit wild that it's not just common knowledge, because I feel like like you said earlier, David, a lot of other professions, it's just kind of the standard. Yeah.
Well, so one thing that I would see a lot when I was practicing is that this accusation would come out a lot in cases where it was always the guy on the other side, opposing party would say, I think my wife is fucking her attorney, right? They would say it all the time. And it turns out that sometimes the guy was right, right? And so what have you seen on those, like the classic and I guess the other question is whether you've seen any of these cases where like they're trading services, like this is what I would get all the time. Yeah, that's how she's paying her legal fee. It was almost always a female client, with a male client. Have you seen anything like that in your career?
I know I've had 2 examples now of this happening with women, but I do think we need to be really cognizant of the gender imbalance and the power imbalance when you're talking about it happening with female attorneys with male clients or male attorneys with female clients. And here's a good example. A few years ago, we had a woman who came and retained the firm here in New Mexico and had previously had a very, very high profile divorce attorney represent her, who had been very well known, had practiced for decades. And when she came in and her new attorney essentially said, like, why are you switching attorneys? It turned out that her attorney had basically been sexually abusing her. And I say that, and I know that sounds harsh, but essentially it had gotten to a point where she was sleeping with him because she felt like she had to. He was convincing her that if she did not continue to keep him as her attorney, everything was going to go terrible. She was going to lose all the money. She was going to lose the kids, all this kind of thing. But she couldn't afford the fees. And so he essentially was like, well, you really need me to still be your attorney, and I'll continue to do that, but I need a little something in return. And so she felt she was traumatized basically at the point she came in and had hired one of our attorneys, who by the way was a female, and was really needed counseling after all of this, and frankly should have turned him into the bar, but didn't. And this is where I think we can start to talk about some of the power imbalances in these things.
Yeah, I mean, if this is who I think it is, that dude's hourly rate, I would have been sleeping with him too. I mean, this dude is very, very pricey.
It didn't sound like she was. It sounded like she was kind of backed into a corner on this situation. Was he like notorious for doing that? Did that ever come out that he was doing that with other people, or it just kind of got swept under the rug?
I had not heard that previously. I mean, I hadn't, but I mean, we very much believed her when she said that this is what had happened to her.
I would guess that a lot of the same things apply to like in sex crimes cases. There's just a lot of shame around this, I would guess. This is why I think it would be rare for people to report it. Like I could see why she would tell us and would feel safe to do that. But
especially,
I mean, it's not a surprise to me that this
might have happened. I feel like a lot of people didn't start feeling too comfortable with even coming out about that kind of stuff till relatively recently. So that makes total sense. I was just wondering, I guess, if, he kept doing this or if any other cases like had come out.
I don't know. I didn't
hear anything else about it, but that to me is the kind of thing that would have been very, very quiet.
This is why I said it was shocking that it took till the 2000s to get this, because you're in such a position of authority and power and emotional distress for the client that it's just not fair or ethical to think that if someone could even agree, even if they said they wanted to, right? It's just a weird set of circumstances. Let's talk about some of the more extreme things that you've seen coming up that you just couldn't believe that an attorney was actually doing this. Like give me a good story in that regard.
I think one thing to remember before you sort of really, or anytime you're having these discussions about attorneys behaving badly, is attorneys go to law school for 3 years, they pass a bar, they swear an oath to do all the things right. They're an officer of the court. They're not going to lie. They have a zealous duty to represent their client at all times. And I think these are things that are important to keep in the back of your mind as you listen to these stories. So I know the person you're talking about. This is an individual who, turns out he was here in New Mexico, having been chased out of California for a bunch of ethical violations, which included lying in trying to get clients. He was essentially sending solicitations to people who'd been arrested in the jail, which when you send those, it clearly has to say like, this is an attorney solicitation. And instead he was saying, these are attorney-client confidential communications. So he was slipping it past basically the sheriff's department and the jail authorities, basically. So you can't do that. That's a big no-no. See, he was already in trouble. So then he comes here, and then New Mexico puts him on automatic probation because of the problems he was having there. And so then while this is all going on, he takes a case. He takes a case which has very ugly underlying facts. This is what this guy does. First, he charges him a fortune for the case. So he gets a bunch of fees paid in it. Then he has multiple conversations with his client, which he records, in which he tells his client, hey, you're going to get convicted. I think you should bribe the witnesses. And if you decide you want to do that, I'll deliver the bribes for you. Oh, and by the way, this could get me disbarred. He recorded the entire thing. So then he does it. Oh, and by the way, in this recording, the client says, oh yeah, I'm totally guilty. I did this thing. And we're going to convince everyone to lie about it. So then he delivers the bribes. Then he goes and prepares affidavits saying everything we said is a lie, and he has all of them sign it. Okay, no, you can't do that. You cannot do that. So then a year goes by until the case finally goes to trial. At this point, the granddaughter has decided, I'm going to testify. I'm going to go in and tell the truth about what happened. He needs to be convicted. They go to trial. She gets on the stand and says, yes, he did this to me. This attorney then takes the false affidavits he prepared and uses them to impeach her. He says, but you said it didn't happen. All of these are huge ethical violations.
So did she know what she had signed, though?
She did, because she was being intimidated. So there are separate crimes for bribery and intimidation of witnesses, which this attorney was committing with the client.
So did the grandpa get acquitted?
He did get acquitted. Acquitted. So then, after he gets acquitted, the attorney says, hey, I think you owe me more. I think you, client, owe me more money. You didn't pay me enough. So he sues him. He sues the client to say, you should give me more money. So client countersues him and says, you're stalking and harassing us, and we're going to get a restraining order against you. So then in his response, he doesn't say, no, I'm not stalking you. It's all this. He says in writing, he says, well, I don't owe them any relief because this client is guilty. He committed this crime. Not only did he commit this crime, he admitted to me that he has been molesting underage women since 1966. And so I should prevail because he is a pedophile who's been committing crimes for 50 years. So
that was in the paper. I remember seeing that in the paper.
It was in the paper. Yeah. So he conveyed confidential communications from his client in a court pleading admitting client's guilt. Okay. So this is only the first crazy thing.
He's just getting started, though. This isn't even the good part. This isn't even the good part.
This is not even the good part?
No. Get to the good part.
No. So in this case, he has 3 major violations. So this is his behaving badly. So 1, he's counseling his client to bribe the witnesses, and he's delivering the bribes himself. And then 2, he's constantly lying to the court, making misrepresentations over and over and over. Like, they signed these affidavits, and this is what they said. Now they're lying. He knows that's not true, right? For all of the witnesses. And then the third part is he's revealing client confidences. These problems are difficult.
This sounds like the real life Better Call Saul.
This is a good
crazy.
Dude.
It's crazy.
But it does get worse.
It gets worse.
It's crazy.
Come on, this is the story that I wanted. This is the one I wanted to talk about.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm taking too long with all these lawyer stories because I think it's fascinating. Yeah. So this guy is lying to courts, bribing witnesses, revealing client confidences, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars for his clients. And while all of this is going on, we had an office downtown, and right across the street, right out my window, I could see this guy's office. He was right across the street from us. And one day I go, hey, there's a bunch of police officers and ambulances across the street. And why would that be? Because this guy shot someone in his office.
Like someone that works with him, not a client.
No, somebody that just came in the door. some homeless guy that just came in and was like, like, hey, can I have some food or something? And he told him to get out, and the guy didn't. So he shot him.
And his wife
So.
videotaped the whole thing. He's like, are you getting this, babe? He's got a gun.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this. He's got a gun.
Yeah.
And the guy is like standing right outside of his doorway, and the attorney's pointing it at him. And he's like, if you step through that door, you're dead. He says to the guy. He says like 3 times. So this guy is
crazy.
like, I think he's just thwacked out on meth or something. And he puts his foot inside the door. And then the attorney shoots him. But I mean, do you think he was trying to shoot him in the leg? I think he was just nervous. Like he shot him in the leg.
Idea.
And it's not funny, but the guy was like, oh, motherfucker. And he like fell down, and then Chip just shut the door. And it's like, why didn't you just shut the door to begin with? So he was prosecuted for that. But take a wild guess what happened. He ends up representing himself.
He represents himself in court. And so the judge puts all these parameters on it. You can't talk about him being homeless. You can't do this. You can't do that. First thing he does is he publishes the guy's mugshot that says busted across it to try and influence the jury. Because I guess if you're homeless, you deserve to be shot, in his mind. He kept calling the victim a methed out lunatic instead of using his name, and then the methed out lunatic came in my office. So yeah, just not great.
And he was acquitted.
He was, the first one was a mistrial because he refused to follow court orders so many times that the judge finally did a mistrial, and then he was finally acquitted. But at that point, the state bar here said enough. He was permanently disbarred in 2017. And then once New Mexico disbarred him, he was disbarred in 4 other states. And so then I did a little diggy to see where he is now. Now he apparently owns a bonding company.
Well, the other thing that we sometimes forget is that the other set of attorneys are the attorneys that make it to the bench and become judges.
Yeah.
And you would think those would be like the best of the best, right? They wouldn't be doing any of this kind of nonsense. But that's not what we find. So can you start and talk a little bit about the Chief Justice, what his case was? And then I have one I want to tell because it's just seriously unbelievable. And not a lot of people have amazingly heard the story. But talk a little bit about what happened with our Chief Judge.
I'll keep this one brief. This is actually, it makes me kind of sad, but this was the chief judge for the largest district here in New Mexico, and was a good judge. Had always been a good judge, very, very impartial to everyone, but had a little bit of a problem with the drugs and alcohol. So he gets arrested at a DWI checkpoint, and when he gets arrested, he has cocaine all over his shirt and a baggie in his lap. So he gets arrested, and then he ends up pleading to DWI and possession of cocaine and resigns from the bench. But things do not get better for him. 4 years later, the cops are breaking down his door in response to a noise complaint. And it turns out that he's in there. He was 60 at the time with his 25-year-old girlfriend. And he ends up getting arrested on domestic violence, kidnapping, and aggravated battery on a household member. Very intoxicated at the time. So that wasn't great. But then at that same point in time, we just had a spate of judges getting arrested for DWIs. One guy that was driving a state-owned van, rolled it in a ditch, and then arrested, convicted of DWI, forced to resign. A Court of Appeals judge who got a DWI and was forced to resign. Another judge that was arrested on felony sexual offenses, acquitted, but forced to resign and had to say he would never hold another judicial position. I would know these are all men, by the way.
What do you think that is? Because, I mean, I just don't think it's kind of common sense not to do some of these things anyways. But when you're in such like a high level of power, or is that what it is? It's just you have this power trip, an ego trip, like nothing can stop me. I don't understand.
I think that's part of it.
I love New Mexico and I love practicing law there. It's a very good place to practice. but it was like the Wild West out there, man. It was like the judges were just
maybe it's just New Mexico.
wild. Maybe.
No,
I
I
don't
think
know.
it's-
No, it can't be.
I think it's a good question though, Brooke. I mean, I think what you, and even people who just watch it on TV, TV shows or movies, you see a lot of people going, yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor, do what you say, Your Honor. That does go to people's heads. And Dave and I have been around we've been doing this a really long time now. We've watched many of our colleagues and peers and friends become judges. And in fact, when we first started working together 20 years ago, I was like, hey, I'm going to go on the bench at some point. You couldn't pay me enough to do that now. It's a miserable experience, but also it changes who a person is. It really does. I think if you have people all day long being very deferential to you, taking what you tell them and saying, okay, well, then that's what we're going to do. It does become easy to get that attitude of, like you said, a power trip, or thinking that you can do no wrong, and they can.
These judges, they get a little bit, it's a little bit weird, right? The power that kind of goes to your head, but also it's very isolating. And that's what people don't realize.
For sure.
You can't really hang around with your friends. You can't go fraternize with all the attorneys that are your friends that may have cases in front of you. You can't go out drinking, go to dinner, like any of that stuff. So in many ways, like your life become pretty small, but like this first guy she was talking about, I heard that, when he came through a roadblock and he had a prostitute in the passenger side, and there was so much coke on his blazer that it was taken into evidence. Like they put it in a bag because it had so much coke on it. So yeah, that was not a great look. And then it's hard to think that these people are sitting in judgment and doling out jail sentences to people. I think that's a tough one to swallow. Okay, the one that I had that I still to this day cannot believe. I'm not going to even say this guy's name. He was from another state, but I don't want to heap any more embarrassment on this guy. If you really want to look it up, you can look it up. He was a district court judge sitting on the bench, and over a long period of time while he was listening to cases, there would be this weird behavior that he would kind of be exhibiting on the stand or on the bench. And there was an odd noise that was coming from his person. It was like, psh, 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 psh. And people are like, what is that? What's that noise? And he's like, I don't hear anything. Well, comes to find out, I swear to God, this guy under his robe during trial is using a penis pump while he's listening to cases. Psh, psh, that's the
not
sound.
Where I thought that was going to go.
I was going to ask you to guess, but you would never guess in a million years.
I thought you were going to say he was like farting or something.
No, I wish he was farting. So I don't know, like if they just like pulled it. Oh, they pulled his robe off, and aha. But that was the disclosure. And it was like a total scandal, complete embarrassment. All of the cases, many of the cases that he had, presided over had to be retried or were overturned. And then he was prosecuted for felony charges for a penis, which I didn't know a penis pump was that serious, but I guess people take it pretty serious. Wouldn't that be
considered like public indecency?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, no one saw it.
You could hear it.
Just the wildest thing, though. The weirdest thing. I think someone saw
the state's big on things that could have happened.
The hose coming out of his robe, and they're like, that motherfucker's got a penis pump. So that's one of the weirder ones that I've seen. We're coming down to the end of our time here, so I kind of want to wrap it up. That for me, unfortunately, one of the themes that I see emerging in all this is that there's a very obvious gender dynamic here on what's going on. And I wanted you to talk for just a little bit here toward the end about you're someone who came up as a young attorney in your mid-20s, working in the public defender's office, going to court, doing jury trials, being around a lot of male attorneys. What was your experience of that? And do you think that has changed? Is it better today? Because everyone feels like wants it to be better, but I just don't know the answer to that.
Well, I want to clarify because I gave a couple of examples involving female attorneys, but one was fairly harmless, like she was finding some dates that way. And the other one was actually a pretty sad case because I think that attorney fell in love with that person. I mean, I think it was a pretty serious relationship. And so those are really the only two examples I have of women sort of using their power, behaving really badly in these sort of power dynamic sort of ways. My personal experiences, I graduated in 1996. So I've been doing this for 30 years. The very first jury trial I ever did, this is just a good example of a gender thing. I did it with a male partner, and afterwards we talked to the jury. All their questions and comments for him were about his performance. All their questions and comments for me were about, they didn't like my nail polish color. I shouldn't have worn pants one day. And why did I wear my hair down? It was all on my appearance. It was nothing about my performance. And that was like 1996. So it's 30 years ago. As a young
What did you
public
think
defender,
of that? I know how you must have felt, but like, what was going through your head?
It was just sort of shocking to me. I wasn't expecting it. They're like, "Oh, you want to talk to the jury? They're going to talk to you about, what they thought
And you're
about how you
excited,
guys did."
thinking
And
they're going to give you some,
yeah, I want to know. Like,
tips
did
on
you
your
like my
cross or something?
opening?
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff. And they were just like, "You shouldn't have worn pants." I was like, "Okay, I guess I should have worn a dress." So that was pretty upsetting. And then as a young public defender, I had more than one male judge hitting on me to the point of like, counsel approached the bench. I would go up and they were sliding notes across the bench to me about what I was wearing. What was I doing later? Things like that. And then I went back and I went back and told my supervisors about it. And I said, so this is going on. They're like, "Great. That means you're going to get good results in there. We're going to put you in there more."
Wow.
And I would like to say that I think things like that have changed. But here's how I know that they haven't. Dave and I have another attorney we know here in town. And this happened a couple of years ago, male attorney. And all of the courtrooms have cameras in them now. And one of the judges was off the bench. She and her clerk went off the bench and she came back, and the clerk had a note that someone had stuck to her monitor that had that, saying like, "I hate to watch you go, but I love to watch you leave," some sort of comment like that someone had stuck on her. Right. Totally gross.
Disgusting.
And so she shows it to the judge, who was female, and the judge said, "Hello." And she talks to the entire courtroom. She goes, "Who put this note on her computer?" And nobody will admit it. And she said, "No one's leaving till I find out." Still nobody says anything. And so she has the bailiff shut the doors so no one can leave. She said, "I'm going to go watch the video to see who it was." And so at that point, this person that Dave and I know, who I have said for decades is very misogynistic, stands up and says, "It was me." Ugh. Married,
Loser.
20 years older than her, daughters, all this stuff.
Course.
And that's who did it. And that was just within the last couple of years. I've talked to young public defenders, young district attorneys, and they say this sort of thing is still going on. So we still have those power dynamics. And all the other examples we've talked about are where men have taken that power and used it against women. We didn't even talk about the male attorneys who represent strippers and then date them, or all of these other extreme examples we can talk about. And I've just never heard of a female attorney doing that. Is there somewhere in the world I could find that? Yes. Anecdotally, it has not been my experience.
See, I feel like when I hear more on the female side, when they're doing that, not always, like some girls are bad too, but it's almost like a Harley Quinn Joker situation where it's like you kind of truly fall in love, get manipulated. It's like this bad boy.
I think,
and then, you forget that their intentions are still bad at the core because rose-colored lenses, you're in love. Whereas I feel like with men, it can be a little bit more of like a power thing.
Yeah. I've not heard or seen of any like predatory behavior from female attorneys. I've heard of them being involved in relationships, but not in a predatory way. So I think that Cynthia's, to me, if there's a silver lining or if there's a ray of hope, it's I think the system is responding a little bit differently. I mean, I'm certainly seeing this with like sexual harassment and just like what the judge did and taking it seriously and everything. But the underlying behavior that causes it, there's still tons of that. Tons of it. All right, Cynthia. Well, before I let you go, I have one more question for you for our viewers out there. And so, if you're a woman, I guess if you're a man too, but if you are being represented and you find yourself in this situation, either this is just unwanted, or maybe you're financially desperate, and this is the proposition that is being made to you. What are your next steps? Like, what do you advise people to do? Where do they go? Who do they talk to if they find themselves in this kind of situation?
I think it depends on the individual person and the circumstances. There are resources that are available to the public at the state bars. So you can contact your local state bar and ask to speak to their disciplinary section. You can go in, you can make a complaint about your attorney that your attorney will have to answer. Now, that can become it's an adversarial proceeding, because essentially if you do that, it gets sent to the attorney has to respond, and almost always that's the end of the relationship. And so you're going to have to go out and find another attorney at that point, obviously. But if it's gotten to the level that you think it's abusive, that you think that you're being taken advantage of in any way, physically, verbally, financially, in any of those ways, you can go ahead and do something like that. Another thing you can do is that you can go and get a second opinion. A lot of attorneys will offer you a consult for a second opinion, depending on what kind of case it is. Even if it's a family law case where you might have to pay a little bit to go in and talk to another attorney, they may be able to clarify for you whether or not the advice you're being given is correct, or whether you're actually experiencing some form of harassment or abuse. And if that's the case, you can hire that attorney and they can advise you on the next steps to take at that point. If it's really, really bad, like if you are scared for your safety, or you think this person is making me uncomfortable enough that I think they could take punitive action against me or try and get back at me in some way, go make a police report. You can get restraining orders. I mean, that's very extreme. So I think the first thing I would do would be to either get a second consult and talk to another attorney to say, hey, is this behavior appropriate? Are they doing the right things? Or to make a disciplinary board complaint. Either of those, I think, are correct. Would you say the same thing, David?
Yeah, I guess I'd add a couple of things to that, because there's some confusion around this, I think, and there's some threats that are made sometimes. And one is, I absolutely agree with the second opinion. People don't realize, you just go, and this is very likely, this happens probably more often in divorce and family law cases, I would say, than in any other type of cases. And so, you can go to the attorney, you can go to an attorney and get a second opinion. But here's the thing, like, you have the right to fire your attorney at any time, even if you owe them money, and they cannot hold your file. That's some bullshit that people will tell you, well, you're not going to get your file back, you got to pay me first, like all this stuff. They'll do a lot of threats to something like that. If I was in that position, I would go find the most aggressive attorney I could find. On the other side of that, hire that person to do my divorce, and then help me get my make sure that I get my file, help me with my disciplinary complaint. And then, like, if the case has been compromised, because sometimes you're like halfway through the case, your attorney may need to get continuances and may need to massage the court to be able to continue to represent you without interruption of the case. But all of that is possible, and the court would be very open to that. They would have some sympathy for that. Let's say that, like, you were coming up on trial and you ended up firing your attorney. There would be some sympathy for this. So I don't want people to be afraid, to fire the attorney and go forward with it. So yeah, that's all I would add to it. Well, Cynthia, listen, thank you so much for your time. There's so much else I would have loved to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you, and we should have you back to talk about AI, because there's some nastiness going on and some nonsense going on with attorneys using AI, but we don't have time for that today. Sure. So anyway, you're welcome to come back anytime. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.